Hello, my name is Marta Piekarska. You might have seen me around for the last 2 days, day and a half. We've been with Construction Blockchain Consortium since almost the very beginning. I think actually before CBC was formed, we had our first meeting with.
I think we were like 4 people and then we became 5.
Yeah, it was more or less that. It was a really good meeting. It was raining. So I'm a huge supporter. Also because it's just nice to have use cases other than financial industry. So CBC is a big friend of ours. But what Hyperledger is, how many people know of Hyperledger? Okay, cool. So I'll give you a bit of background of what we actually are, because there are some misconceptions about it, and then we can dive into other things. So Hyperledger is a global open source software community. We are not a consultancy. We don't provide developer services. We don't code. We don't sell products. What we do is we bring together members and open source community, members being enterprises, non-for-profits, governments, and so on and so forth, and open source developers who devote their time to code based on Hyperledger. We bring them together to help them work and develop the frameworks and tools that we are hosting. The code in Hyperledger is open source. Anybody can use it, anybody can download it, anybody can build on top of it their own solutions. You can basically play around with it. All of our working groups, all of our special interest groups, technical steering committee, all of it is open to public. So there is no limit to what a non-member can do within Hyperledger. Membership comes with the benefit of some PR, marketing support, and so on, but it's not like you here cannot participate in our working groups just because you don't come from member companies. We are hosted by the Linux Foundation. Linux Foundation has been started 20 years ago to basically promote open source software in any industry. So we started off with what happens if Linus Torvalds is hit by a bus. How do we keep Linux going? It turned out that there's a lot of developers around there who are already using Linux as an operating system, and they're contributing to it, but there's no governance model around them, so they were all just kind of floating around and doing a thing. So Linux Foundation was started basically to give them a home, to give them a place where they can participate. It worked really well for Linux Foundation, so 20 years later we are over 150 different projects. Some of them you may know, like Node.js, like Let's Encrypt. Those of you who worked with databases will know Kubernetes. So all of those projects are a Linux Foundation project, similarly to Hyperledger. And Hyperledger was started 3 years ago to promote blockchain technologies for enterprises. We've kind of looked at the space and about 30 enterprises came together and said, well, what do you, Jim, our executive director, what would you like to do with Bitcoin? And he said, well, maybe I would buy some Bitcoin, but I don't want to do anything with it. However, blockchain, the underlying technology, is pretty cool, and I would like to see how we can support enterprises. So Hyperledger kind of followed the curve that we all followed, and I'm sure you kind of saw the number of blockchain projects that have been rising and rising. The interesting part is that also the number of open source projects on GitHub is basically the same kind of curve there, which is really interesting because it shows how much blockchain promotes open source and how much blockchain contributes to open source projects. And then Boom for Blockchain, I'm sure you've seen that or experienced that, kind of people coming into us and saying, so could you sprinkle some blockchain on it, or could you put blockchain into things? I've worked for Blockstream, which is a Bitcoin company, and we literally had people coming in and saying, could you put a blockchain into my project? I'm like, well, what color of blockchain is it? But there is a spectrum, and what started off, and I'm sure you've heard that story many times, that blockchain is the technology that has been around for way longer than Bitcoin. It is something that the scientists and researchers have been working on for a very long time. And then Satoshi Nakamoto came in and kind of pieced together all of those elements, and it is a brilliant invention in that way, because they took something that is very kind of was scattered around, very different, and put it together, including solving the biggest challenge, which was double spend. So with that, we saw Bitcoin, and that brought people more close to blockchain as a technology. And then from there on, we could go to looking at how blockchain can be used for other applications. So today we see that spectrum of blockchains, where permissionless public blockchains like Ethereum, like Bitcoin, are very useful when it comes to cryptocurrencies. So places where you want anybody to use it and anybody to contribute to it. It's like, the two parts are visibility and accessibility. So if you want full visibility and anybody could join it, permissionless public blockchain is great. However, in many cases, you want to have a kind of more concise, closed environment. That would be, for instance, handling healthcare medical records. Also, in some cases, I would argue that construction space is that. You don't want anybody to submit information to your construction chain. And we've been talking with Abel a lot about the responsibility chain. So how do we track responsibility throughout the construction process from the very start, where you decide to build a building and you buy the ground and you have already a certification there saying that the ground is stable and you can build a skyscraper on it, through the process of design, constructing, and so on. And how many different elements come in there, where you have a lot of people with a lot of independent incentives, so you're basically building a trust network. And that is where blockchain makes sense. But these people should be kind of admitted to the blockchain space based on what they do. So not anybody could join it, but they should be kind of fulfilling some sort of permissions or have some permissions to join it. So that's permission private blockchain. And then there's the middle ground. Permissioned public blockchains are very interesting space now, especially when it comes to identity or certification. These are the ones which are basically mimicking how we interact as humans most often, which is there is a body or a set of bodies that we trust that are allowed to issue certain information or issue certain credentials. But then anybody out in the outside world should be allowed to verify those credentials and check if I do have that PhD in computer science or not. So that's kind of how we define that space. What Hyperledger does is everything but permissionless public network. That also means that I'm not competitive with Ethereum or Bitcoin because it's not my playground, which makes things easier because I have a lot of friends in the Bitcoin space. We started 3 years ago. We started with 30 members. Now we are 270 or 280 members. We have 12 active community and working groups, and I'll tell you a bit more about that. And we have 13 projects and about to launch 14th project. So what started with Hyperledger Fabric that you might have heard of, or Hyperledger Sawtooth, these were our two initial projects, now grew into a whole plethora of topics. And I can tell you more about it during the break or during the Q&A, what these projects do. Basically what you need to know is that the frameworks are like a sponge when you bake a cake. It's the basis of your cake, but then how you decorate it, what kind of layers you put in there and decorate, or flavors or gems or whatever else, that's up to you. We provide just that sponge, so the base layers. And for blockchain, this base layer is the governance model for the blockchain. So the way that you set the permissions, not what permissions are there specifically, but the way that you set those permissions, the programming language that you use, approach to smart contracts and the language for smart contracts. So some of them support Solidity, some of them support their own chain code smart contract. and so on. And then the consensus mechanism. All of them support different consensus mechanisms. Sorry?
5 minutes.
Yes, I know. I have a clock here. Yeah, this is basically how they work. Some of the interesting ones are Hyperledger Grid. It was just recently launched as a supply chain specific project, so something that some of you might be interested in. So Hyperledger Ursa is our security and shared cryptographic library project that also might be of interest to you. But really, blockchain is just a technology. It is a very powerful tool, but it's not a solution. And you can put blockchain into your solution or design your solution with blockchain in mind, but blockchain will not solve all of your problems and will not make your life just immediately ideal. So when blockchain makes sense, it makes sense when you have, as I said, you're building a trust network. You have a lot of devices, a lot of participants, a lot of technologies. All of this is like a bursting or buzzing kind of beehive, if you will, of dynamically changeable interactions. And blockchain then makes a lot of sense because you want to have trust in a trustless system. On the other hand, if you have an need for audits, you don't want to remove the data, you actually want to keep the data, and you're putting emphasis on provenance, that's basically building a transparency network, and that's where blockchain, again, makes sense. But I'm quite often asked, what is the business impact of blockchain? And these are not the numbers that I came up with last night having a glass of wine. This is actually some of our members contributed to this research. The elements like the holistic view, so having a universal view of information, transparency, the fact that it is cheaper because you simplify the complexity of operations, also the speed, and by speed I don't mean how many transactions per second can you put on the blockchain or through the blockchain that everybody's so excited about, because actually the really big improvement in speed is with the accessibility of information. The fact that you don't have to call in 7 offices and have 7 different people sign off on getting that one piece of information that usually today we don't even do by phone, we do by email, which lags even more because someone was on holidays. So that 2-week process boils down to 15 minutes of searching on the blockchain for that information, and we know it's trusted because it's immutable and all that beautiful stuff. So that's what I mean by speed. And then security. The fact that we are able to log the transactions and not change them means that the information is secured. And then it increases your revenue, improves your customer experience, reduces expenses, and provides higher assurance. And now that I have less time, you will not hear about all the awesome use cases that Hyperledger is being used at, but I'll just flash them at you and you can ask me more about those. This is this is intellectual property chain, so something that some of you might be interested in, especially when it comes to design and the giving credit to the right people for what they're doing, and also in terms of research, so making sure that the research is credited to the right people and also is available, the results are available. What I will say is that we have community working groups that are focused more on the technical aspects of things. They meet online, they have mailing lists, they have dial-in calls once every 2 weeks, and there are also community special interest groups that are focused more on the certain domains. So we have healthcare, public sector, social impact, supply chain, trade finance, now looking at capital markets. And actually it's the public sector. Just today I was talking to some guys from Gemalto that are asking about doing a subgroup in the public sector for regulations. So if people would be interested in regulatory aspects of blockchain, let me know. If you want to learn more, you can talk to me. You can visit our wiki and website, and they are full of all sort of interesting information. And you can take the recommended self-paced training that is free of charge, open source, online training. It's fairly simple to go through it. It starts off very high level on what blockchain is, what is a smart contract, and all of that. And the more technical ones, so the Introduction to High Ledger Technologies, I think, that one, is the one which teaches you also how to code. But because it's online and open source, no one will spank you for not finishing it if you don't feel like doing coding. But of course, you can always email me or talk to me. Thank you. Questions? I have time for like one question probably.
I have a very, very basic question, Marta. Maybe I should save it for later, but I'll ask anyways. Very technical. So with the Iroha project for mobile phones, is this something, I don't know it, I don't know the project, so is this something similar to IOTA where you can,
No.
Is self-mining?
No. Iroha is traditional permission blockchain for enterprises. Only it is very lightweight. It provides SDK for both iOS and Android to run your. That's a very weird sound. To run your blockchain clients on a mobile phone. So it could be both KYC things, like you're allowing people to run or prove their identity to banks through mobile phones, all the way through mobile wallet payments. While IOTA, for those of you who don't know, is machine-to-machine communication through a blockchain-like solution, but mostly just gossip protocol and kind of all sort of weird magic. So it's not really that much of a blockchain, rather it's a whole new invention, in my opinion.